From polished shoes on a Monday morning sidewalk to a firm handshake that sealed a business deal based on nothing but a man's word, the men of the 1950s lived by a set of daily habits that most of us have completely forgotten. But here's what's interesting. These weren't grand gestures or rare acts of courage. They were tiny, boring routines, repeated every day, that quietly built one of the most capable generations of American men in modern history. These are 15 of those habits and what they actually look like in practice. Number 15, the morning shave. Before he poured his first cup of coffee, a post-war American man stood at the bathroom mirror with a Gillette Superspeed safety razor, a boar bristle shaving brush, and a puck of shaving soap. He lathered his face by hand, mapped the direction of his beard growth, shaved with the grain, and finished with a bracing splash of aftershave, something like Pinot Clubman or Old Spice. Stubble was considered genuinely sloppy in that era. You showed up clean-shaven to the office, to church, even to the hardware store on a Saturday morning. It was a 5-minute ritual that set the tone for the entire day, and it happened every single morning without exception. Number 14, dressing like you meant it. The average man wore a pressed suit, a knotted tie, and a fedora just to ride the bus to work. Frank Sinatra made the look iconic in photographs, but it was standard issue for millions of ordinary men walking into offices across post-war America. Pocket squares sat folded in breast pockets while cufflinks held starched sleeves neatly together. And almost nobody left the house bareheaded. The hat came off indoors always, whether you were entering a restaurant, a church, or a neighbor's living room. It was a sign of respect so automatic that it required no thought at all. But the next habit on this list might be the one we've lost the most completely. Number 13, the handshake. Fathers taught their sons how to shake hands the way they taught them how to catch a baseball. A firm grip, direct eye contact, 1 or 2 pumps, then release. A weak handshake told people you were uncertain of yourself. An overly strong one told them you were trying too hard to prove something. The right one said everything it needed to without a single word. Business deals at the downtown office, job interviews across the desk, introductions at church on Sunday. They all started with the same gesture, and men practiced it until it became second nature. Number 12, writing letters by hand. Before email and text messages existed, men sat down at wooden desks with fountain pens and wrote actual letters on proper stationery. They wrote to relatives in other states, to old war buddies they had not seen in years, and to business partners in distant cities. Many of these men had spent years writing letters home from military bases overseas, and the habit stuck long after they returned to civilian life. It took time, and that was the point. You had to organize your thoughts before ink touched paper, because crossed out words and smudged lines looked careless. A handwritten letter carried real weight in the mailbox. It meant you cared enough to sit still, think clearly, and commit something worth reading to a physical page. But while letters revealed how men of the 1950s communicated, the following habit reveals how they planned for the future. Number 11, saving money on purpose. Through the 1950s and into the 1970s, the average American household saved roughly 11% of its disposable income. Today, that number sits below 5%. Back then, saving was not an afterthought or something you did with whatever was left over at the end of the month. It was the first line item in the household budget. Men opened savings accounts at the local bank alongside their checking accounts and treated deposits the same way they treated the electric bill. The post-war generation had survived the Depression, wartime rationing, and years of doing without. They remembered what it felt like to have nothing in the cupboard, and they built financial cushions so their families never would. And the one that comes next connects directly to that same mindset. Number 10. Fixing things yourself. The typical post-war father changed his own oil in the driveway, patched his own roof after a storm, and rewired his own table lamps when the switch failed. He kept a toolbox in the garage and a wooden workbench pushed against the back wall. If the lawnmower wouldn't start on a Saturday morning, he pulled the spark plug and cleaned it. Before he ever thought about calling a repairman, hardware stores like Ace and True Value became neighborhood institutions specifically because men actually used what they sold. The idea of paying someone to hang a shelf would have felt like admitting defeat. But while the garage was his domain during daylight hours, the kitchen table was where everything came together each evening. Number 9. Sitting down for dinner together. Every evening, the family gathered around the kitchen table at the same time. Dad sat at the head, still in his work clothes. The children reported on their school day. Mom served the roast or the casserole she had spent the afternoon preparing. There were no television trays in the early 50s, no phones buzzing in pockets. Just plates of food, conversation, and a routine so consistent it became the heartbeat of the entire household. And what came next in the evening routine paired perfectly with that sense of daily preparation. Number 8. Polishing shoes on Sunday night. Every Sunday evening, men across America pulled out a tin of Kiwi shoe polish, an old cotton rag, and a horsehair buffing brush. They sat in the living room, often with a ball game playing on the radio, and worked polish into every pair of leather dress shoes they owned. It wasn't vanity. It was preparation. A man walked into his Monday morning office already put together, not rushing to look presentable at the last minute. The ritual was about more than keeping leather conditioned. It was about stepping into the Monday morning office with intention already built in. However, preparation in the 1950s wasn't limited to appearance, because it extended just as deeply to the mind. Number 7. Reading the morning newspaper cover to cover. Before the smartphone, before 24-hour cable news, a man's morning started with the local daily paper. He read it front to back, sometimes over eggs and toast at the breakfast table, sometimes folded into quarters on the commuter train. He knew what was happening in his city council, in the national legislature, and in world affairs before he ever reached his office desk. The newspaper was a daily exercise in informed citizenship, and it quietly made men sharper in conversation, more thoughtful at the voting booth, and more aware of the world beyond their own block. If you're finding value in this, hit subscribe. We cover stories like this one every single week. Now, this next habit is one that disappeared so gradually that nobody even noticed it was gone. Number 6. Walking to nearby errands. In the suburban neighborhoods that were expanding rapidly after the war, men walked to the barber shop on the corner, the post office 2 blocks over, and the drugstore across the street. Physical movement was simply part of daily life because the family car stayed parked in the garage unless you genuinely needed it. There were no gym memberships and no fitness trackers on anyone's wrist. There were just errands to run, yards to mow, and a few honest miles of sidewalk walked each day. And that steady rhythm of movement was enough to keep a working man in reasonable shape well into his 50s and beyond. Number 5. Keeping a strict daily schedule. The post-war American father woke at the same time every morning, caught the same commuter train, clocked in at the same hour, came home on the same evening bus, and sat down for dinner at 6 sharp. The routine was rigid, but it wasn't empty. It created genuine predictability for his wife and children, and quiet discipline for himself. His family knew exactly when to expect him through the front door. His kids could set a clock by the sound of his footsteps on the porch. There was no uncertainty, no last-minute texts saying he'd be late. Just a dependable rhythm that held the household together week after week. But this next habit helped build the country in a very literal way. Number 4, learning a trade. High schools across America in the 1950s offered shop classes where teenage boys learned woodworking, metalwork, basic electrical wiring, and automobile mechanics with their own hands. Many young men went straight from graduation into formal apprenticeships, learning plumbing, carpentry, or welding under experienced tradesmen in their communities. These weren't fallback careers or second-choice paths. They were the backbone of the greatest building boom in American history. Between 1940 and 1960, the home ownership rate in this country jumped from 43% to nearly 62%. And tradesmen with calloused hands built almost every single one of those homes. Number 3, showing up at church or community gatherings. Whether a man was deeply devout or just going through the expected motions, Sunday morning meant a clean white shirt, a pressed pair of slacks, and a reserved seat in the wooden pew. Church wasn't only about personal faith. It was a social anchor for the entire neighborhood. Men saw the same familiar faces every week, caught up on community news in the parking lot after the service, and held themselves accountable to a group of people who knew their families by name. If someone needed help moving furniture or rebuilding a fence after a storm, this is where those conversations happened. When a household missed a Sunday without explanation, the neighbors noticed, and someone usually knocked on the door by Monday evening to check in. But if church kept men accountable to their community, this next habit kept them accountable to their own wallets. Number 2, paying with cash and avoiding debt. The first widely available credit card, the Bank AmeriCard, did not launch until 1958. And even then, most families treated it with suspicion. Before plastic existed, if a man at the department store counter could not afford something, he simply did not buy it that day. Layaway plans were an option, but they demanded patience and weekly payments before you ever took the item home. Consumer debt, as we understand it today, barely existed in post-war America. Men carried leather wallets with folded bills and loose coins, budgeted their earnings on a weekly basis, and understood the physical weight of spending money in a way that tapping a credit card at a modern register will never communicate. But this last habit might be the one that mattered more than all the others combined. Number 1, teaching sons through presents, not lectures. In the 1950s, a father did not sit his boy down at the kitchen table for a speech about responsibility and hard work. He handed him a wrench in the garage and said, "Hold this steady." Boys learned to change flat tires in driveways on Saturday afternoons, repair torn screen doors before summer, and balance a household checkbook by watching their fathers do it first. The education happened quietly in garages and kitchens, through physical presence, patient repetition, and hundreds of small shared tasks over the course of years. There was no tutorial on a screen and no search engine to consult. Just a father standing next to his son, passing competence from one calloused pair of hands to a smaller pair, still learning what to grip and when to let go. For most of those boys, those garage afternoons became the foundation they built everything else on top of. Those 15 habits weren't dramatic or complicated. They were small, unglamorous routines, repeated so often they became invisible to the men who practiced them. Nobody wrote books about polishing shoes on a Sunday night or walking 2 blocks to the post office. Nobody gave speeches about reading the paper over breakfast. And yet those tiny rituals, stacked together across years and decades, created something that is genuinely hard to find today. A quiet steadiness held families, neighborhoods, and entire communities in place. Some of those habits deserve to come back. Others belong to a world with rules and limitations that no longer apply. The question worth sitting with, quietly and honestly, is which ones are which?